Another regular at Animal Rights Day is Attorney Jeremy Cohen of Boston Law Dogs. Today, he discusses pet custody issues and gives advice on animal matters he frequently gets calls about. Jeremy?
Thanks, Diane. It's great to be here for Animal Rights Day. And part of what I wanted to talk about today is the disjointedness between how we as pet owners feel about our pets versus how the law, at least in Massachusetts and in most states in this country, look at our pets. An example of that is through pet custody cases. So we'll get calls from young people who decide to move in together and split up after getting a pet, or married people who want to get divorced. And right now, the law wants us to look at who has title to that animal, who's the one that purchased it, whose name is on the sales receipt. But at Boston Dog Lawyers, we're saying that is not nearly enough to prove who owns the dog or who should get the dog. We often believe that both people in a relationship have rights to the dog, possessory rights, and it's not just that snapshot in time when you purchased the animal or adopted the animal. It's what's happened since then. And it's not just about money, it's about time and bonding and walking the dog and taking the dog to the vet, and who does the dog sleep with? I mean, I'm not saying that we should look at we can't ask the dog, but there's ways, indicators now where I think courts need to start looking at what's in the best interest of the animal. So we've seen in states like Alaska, Illinois, California, New York, they're starting to look at what's in the best interest of all involved. Because the owners oftentimes will say, I can't live without this dog, it's my support animal, my service dog, but let's look at what's happening with the dog. So I want to know who has the better yard, who works 60 hours a week, and who's home more. Financial ability is certainly something that's important. Are there other pets? Splitting up pets is not good for the pets. And sometimes if there's two animals, courts love to just say, well, you take one and you take one, but that's really not considering the impact that it has on the cats or on the dogs. There's certainly cases where one party brings the animal into the relationship. But what we want to look at, getting away from that snapshot in time, let's look at over the last few years, who and when did something change? So in a lot of relationships, there's a when. There's a point in time where this dog became somebody else's, where the girlfriend took over or the boyfriend suddenly took over more of the care of the dog. So we want to get away from just who brought it into the relationship. For instance, we had a case where the husband, ex-husband now, had sent his wife and the dog ahead to scope out a place to live for 2 months in advance. And it was during that time that she and the dog bonded. So to say that it was always going to be his dog because he's the one who brought it into the relationship is just not true. And we are compelling courts now to look at, in terms of who would be the better owner, is there abuse involved? We now know that courts are tying together harassment prevention orders where if somebody was abusing a person, they want to protect the animal too. There's hundreds of indicia of ownership, or at least possessory rights to your pets. And it's different in every case, but we're seeing laws change. Unfortunately, not so much in Massachusetts yet. We need our legislators to step up and recognize the way these other states have been, that these pets are more than property. They have a special purpose. And I'm not advocating right now that they have to go right from being a piece of property to have full rights and standing. I'm not saying that. But they certainly have interests that need to be considered beyond just what the owners have paid for or are arguing makes them the owner. For instance, in probate court, in family court right now, when we take a case there, judges do not want to handle anything related to the pets. And we see that even though the pets are such an emotional component of that relationship and people are so keyed in on what's going to happen to them, the judges in family court, they push it off. And it's just overlooked. And we see that judges will allow us to come to agreements outside of the court. So we often draft joint custody agreements. And yes, joint custody agreements can happen. In a joint custody agreement, we consider, here's what's happening. here's all the needs of the dog to think about. And we go from everywhere from making sure the dog or cat eats the same food wherever it goes versus has the same veterinary care, who's caring for it financially. What about if one of the owners predeceases the pet? Then what happens? Or what to do when there's an emergency medical situation with the pet. So we're drafting these agreements almost as if they dovetail into a pet trust as to let's make the courts enforce what's best for the animal. And it's concerning to me that a lot of people don't know that they have rights to shear an animal, or oftentimes one partner is bullied by the other into believing if they try to pursue it, they'll lose all custody rights. And I had a lawyer call me last week who was concerned that she was going to have to stay in a relationship until her dog died because she didn't want to have to lose her dog. And that is so sad and not true, because you have ownership rights. You may not have full ownership rights, but we're getting courts to recognize that shared custody is an option. And in terms of talking about what's in the best interest of our animals, our pets, I do want to give some pet owners a few other tips aside from just custody cases. If you are going to board a dog, please know that boarding facilities are not regulated. I take it upon myself as part of Boston Dog Lawyers that we are the regulating entity right now. I see too many cases where they trust a boarding facility that there's staff overnight. Make sure there's going to be staff there overnight. Make sure they're going to have a functioning air conditioner or heating system. Make sure that they're going to keep, even daycare, small dogs away from big dogs. Are they temperament testing before? Because too many animals are dying at daycare and boarding facilities because of just simple things that could be fixed, keeping the animals separate. Do they have a protocol for breaking up a dog fight? Do they have a fire emergency plan? If nobody's going to be there overnight, who's watching out for the dogs in case of an emergency like that? I'm seeing too many cases come to us about that issue, and oftentimes the defense is, look, there's no regulation, so we really don't have to have a protocol, and that's not fair. That's not right for us pet owners. And last thing to cover today is working with your veterinarian. Being a vet is a very difficult job. We get a call or two a day about somebody saying the vet harmed my animal, but it's really not true. What happens is vets are conditioned now, if something goes wrong and a pet owner has a dispute or a grievance, they're conditioned to turn their back. Insurance companies tell them, do not talk to the client anymore. And then people come to me because they haven't been heard and they don't know what happened to their animal. If you could engage your vet more and say, I'm not looking to sue you. I'm just looking for information so I know, did I do something wrong? Did I come to the wrong place? Did I not seek out a specialist? Too many people, pet owners, when something happens, they get this pet ownership guilt. And if you could get your vet to talk to you about your pet more, I think that disputes would be quelled. You need information, and when pet owners don't have that information is when they come to us. And it's often not the case that the vet committed malpractice, but you won't know that because you're not hearing the information you want to hear from your vet. So ask them to speak to you more. Let them know you're not necessarily trying to sue them. You just want information. That's it for me today. We have other tips for pet owners every day of the year at Boston Dog Lawyers, and we're always happy to answer your questions. Thank you.